this clicker. You could demolish a building with that. I spoke here in 2007 last time. I think the clicker was the same. Were any of you in the room in 2007? A few of you. All right, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. You're going to be really pleased today. There's about 23% all new material. So just bear with me for the first bit. I just want to tell the rest of you a little bit about who I am and what I'm doing here. So my name is Matt Mason. I grew up in London. And as a teenager, I was very, very involved in pirate radio. Pirate radio stations still exist all over London and other parts of Europe and the world. Turns out you can put a radio station up in a major city just by climbing up the top of a building like I'm doing here and duct taping an antenna to the top of a tower block. You can reach millions of people in a city like London. And so that's what we did. And it is a crime, it is illegal, and the police were out trying to catch us. But because our station was so big and our audience was so big, the police also used to advertise with us. So that sort of tells you what pirate radio is about. And none of us were trying to be criminals. We were there because we were trying to support the arts, and we were trying to support artists. And that's why I did it, and that's what I loved about it. And the pirate radio world sort of has a symbiotic relationship with commercial radio, and it looks like this. So if this white square is the market, you've got a couple of big commercial stations in there. They're hit-driven. They have to get the biggest audiences, so they get the most ad revenue. So they play all the hits all the time. Well, the pirates are in this kind of grey area where their listeners aren't really tuning into them for that. They want something a bit more experimental. So the pirate radio stations is where a lot of the experimentation happens. So things like dubstep and grime and drum and bass, UK garage. A lot of these music scenes came from London pirate radio that now really kind of defined a lot of the sound you hear in the American charts today. And I was a big part of those early scenes, and I started a magazine called Rewind, which was really just sort of define this culture and define this voice for young London. And Rewind is still the largest music magazine in the UK today. So after Rewind, I was just really thinking about these grey areas and sort of piracy as this kind of force of nature. And I decided to write a book about it, The Piratelemma, and I launched it here at BIF, BIF3. And the main point I made in the book was, if you're trying to compete with piracy or deal with it or wrestle with it in some way, there's sort of two ways you can think about it. You can try and fight it and stop people with legal means, or you can try and see if there's some value that the pirates are creating. Why do people like what they're doing? And if there is some value, then quite often the better thing to do is copy them. And we've seen this play out in the music industry. This is really the canary in the coal mine for, I think, a lot of things that are coming in future. Back in 2000, you had all these peer-to-peer networks like Napster and LimeWire, and all of the labels just didn't know what to do with them. Like, tried to shut them down, tried to make MP3s illegal, and some of these enterprises started to grow into real things. Steve Jobs said, if you want to compete with piracy, the way to compete with them is to copy them, and that's what he did with iTunes. iTunes is a clone of Napster. Spotify is a clone of BitTorrent, and then you've got illegal stuff on SoundCloud and YouTube, and all of the labels were mad about this. Well, if you fast forward to right now, these guys are the establishment. Warner Music's equity position in music startups is worth more than Warner Music's catalog. That's crazy, right? This is the music industry. So this has happened, but one thing I found really interesting was this purple logo here, the BitTorrent ecosystem. This has sort of been the last bastion of piracy. So BitTorrent's really interesting. It's an open source protocol. It moves around 40% of the world's internet traffic every day. It is the best way to move a large file on the internet. It just does not break, and it works for all sorts of things. It's the AK-47 of the internet. So this is the BitTorrent client. This is kind of what it looks like. And it's not very exciting to look at. It powers lots of things. Lots of people use it. Every time Facebook want to update Facebook, they use the BitTorrent protocol. So do Twitter, so do Etsy, so does Wikipedia. The Large Hadron Collider uses it. The Human Genome Sequence, lots of stuff is shared via BitTorrent for that. Lots of things use BitTorrent. That's cool. That's not why I cared about BitTorrent. What I liked about it was there's 170 million people using BitTorrent every month, and they're primarily using it to get stuff from piracy sites like the Pirate Bay. So I looked at this and I was like, wait a second, this is the largest pirate radio station in the world. If you try and compete with piracy here, this is the best place to test out the ideas I've been writing about. So I met the guys at BitTorrent, and I joined to head up marketing and content at the end of 2011. And what I want to talk to you about today is some of the experiments we ran there, which actually ended up in us building an entirely new platform for artists. and some of the things we learned, because I think they might apply to some other things too. So I'm going to talk about the 5 things I learned from competing with piracy. And the first rule is go with the grain of your network. Like, context is everything, whatever you're doing, especially if you're trying to address any kind of new audience. And the thing that was interesting to me about BitTorrent was it wasn't going to work if we just put like an iTunes type store in there and tried to sell people stuff, because BitTorrent is for file sharing. It's for taking the content out of the store and sharing it around with your friends. So the first thing that we did when we were thinking about this new file format for BitTorrent was, instead of putting content in stores, let's put the store inside the content itself. So we changed the BitTorrent file, and we made this new type of file where you could have some stuff here for free before the gate, and then you could have a gate, and you could ask the person sharing the file or opening the file to do something, like enter an email address, and then they could get some other cool stuff behind the gate. So you literally turn the file into the store, and wherever people shared them, they saw the gate. And we weren't sure if people were going to like this, and so we started just with email, and just very sort of, very subtly started doing this, and users were actually okay with it. They liked seeing artists put stuff in these files. The second thing that I learned, and this was more from the artists we work with, is it's always really important to give people options, if you can, instead of giving them rules. All of the different musicians and filmmakers and people who came to work with us, they all had a different business model. There is no one business model for distributing digital content. So the more malleable we could make this platform, the better. So instead of just one gate with enter your email, we had just give stuff away for free, email, you set the price, or pay what you want, let the audience set the price. We had 4 different gates, so artists could really decide how they got their stuff to this massive audience that we had. So we did that, and we called this thing BitTorrent Bundle, and we had a big splashy marketing launch, and suddenly this very sort of boring looking box, suddenly there were all these different files in it with metadata and artwork, and it started to look nice, and people were getting excited about bundles. And I was really excited, and we launched it with Cascade, and I thought, well, now just sit back and wait for the music industry to give us some kind of like Nobel Prize or something for fixing everything. They didn't do that. In fact, none of the labels would work with us, and we got quite a frosty reception. This is a quote from the CEO of Sony Pictures Classics after coming off a stage at a Variety Marketing Summit where I was also speaking. He said he was shocked and appalled that I was there and I should be in jail. That wasn't a great start. This guy's another film producer, also sometime brawler, who challenged me to a boxing match because he disagreed so strongly with what we were trying to do. This guy saw me, thought I was a pirate, and tried to fight me. Clearly, he had not read my book. So yeah, that didn't discourage us. We carried on, and the thing is, when people are saying stuff about you, and it's all very subjective, the best thing you can have on your side is data. And this is so true in the creative industries right now. You need to own your data, and the internet, for the first time, has allowed people to do that. So we started throwing data in front of people and showing them what was happening. And if you look at some of the conversion rates, some of the things we were seeing going on, this is people legally consuming content in ways that benefits artists inside of BitTorrent. These conversion rates are crazy. Like the average banner ad, just to give context, converts at a rate of about 0.1% on the internet. So we started surveying all of these BitTorrent users who were legally consuming content. It turns out all of these people, even though they were going to the Pirate Bay and then opening their BitTorrent client and then seeing the bundles and then seeing our surveys and talking to us, they actually spend loads of money on content, much more than your average user of the internet. So this was really, really cool. And this is a much bigger point. It wasn't about BitTorrent owning data and then spoon-feeding it out to people. We wanted the artists to own the data. So this is the back end of the bundle system. And if you're an artist and you upload your stuff there and people start consuming it, you'll start to see numbers like this, and you can see who's done what, and if people have unlocked with email, you can download all your emails by the location of where people are. You get all of that stuff, and here's the really cool bit. BitTorrent doesn't get any of that stuff. Because it's a peer-to-peer network, there's no center, there was no big server for us to suck up this information. This is your information, this is about your fans, and as far as we were concerned, you own it. And that's a larger point that we believed at BitTorrent. We think that data needs to belong to you, whether it's your behavior on the internet or your human genome. This is a billboard campaign we ran. We also managed to upset the NSA as well as the labels in Hollywood. It's an important point, and we need to think about it more as the internet continues to mature. Delivery is everything. This is true in comedy. It's true in lots of things. It's definitely true when you're trying to get something to people. If you can get it to them in a really, really special way, then you're going to have a lot of success. And I really learned this by watching artists. Like, they were much smarter than us. about how they worked with our audience. So we did something with Moby. He reached out to us and said he wanted to work with us, and we went to Moby's house in the Hollywood Hills, and I had all these like spreadsheets and things, and conversion rates and data, and how much money I was going to make him, and blah, blah, blah. And he looks at me and he says, what if, to get my new album, what if you just have to get your friend an ice cream? Can we do that? And that blew my mind. I was like, of course, like a cultural moment in time, like that's so much more valuable to a guy like Moby who's already made all the money in the world. De La Soul did a great bundle with us, the hip-hop trio. They released the mixtape on BitTorrent. They asked for your email address, and you got the mixtape. We thought that was the end of it. A week later, they emailed the 50,000 people who had asked for this mixtape and given them their address, and gave them a second mixtape, which was the real mixtape. And also there was this cryptic, loads of cryptic clues at the end of the email, which it turned out was 100 clues to 100 locations of 100 special picture disc vinyls of this mixtape, which fans went crazy for and the internet went crazy for. There's probably no better example of a band that's done cool things with delivery than Radiohead. And so when it came to launch the first paid-for torrent file, we worked with Radiohead's lead singer Tom York for about 18 months. And he ended up recording an album especially to do this because he believed so much, especially in the kind of the data stuff that we were doing and an independent alternative to iTunes. We released this, and just the act of an artist releasing a paid-for file on BitTorrent literally broke the internet. It was downloaded 4.5 million times. It's one of the most successful albums of last year. Tons of great press, and it was really, really cool. So people did come around, they did start working with us. All of the majors now have published at least 1 or 2 bundles, some of them many. A lot of the film studios started working with us too, including Sony. Sony got hacked at the end of 2014, and we could have laughed at that at BitTorrent because they hadn't been nice to us. But this really brings me to sort of point number 5. Like, people will fight you, and you just got to work with them anyway, right? Like, if you're really trying to do something good, just do good things, right? So we helped them out as much as we could with the interview, and even Sony Classics, the guys that should be in jail, they started releasing stuff with us this year. Todd Brown, the guy who wanted to fight me, well, yeah, I knocked him out TKO round 2. That was a lot of fun at a film festival. But what was more important was during the training and all the sort of back and forth, I actually got to know Todd, and I really understood his perspective on us more and told him more about Bundle. And I was really pleased when he released his next film as a BitTorrent bundle earlier this year, spring. It's really, really cool. You should definitely check it out. So yeah, that was BitTorrent, and I quit this summer, and I'm thinking about sort of what's next. But over the summer, the RIAA, Recording Industry Association of America, sent a nasty letter to BitTorrent saying they'd seen 1.6 million illegal downloads on BitTorrent in the US in 2014, and we really ought to do more about that. And they called me out by name, so I felt compelled to write back to them. It's like, guys, in 2014, we had 250 million people legally download something via BitTorrent. So when piracy is a rounding error on the amount of legal activity happening, maybe you should be sending us thank you letters. So that was then, and I'm trying to think about what's next for piracy as I sort of think about what I do next. And I want to talk a little bit about a side project I'm working on because I'm seeing something interesting happening. The reason that piracy became so easy on the internet is because there's no cost to produce an extra copy of anything. And I think we're starting to get there in the physical world. If you look at what's happening in energy, by the middle of this century, the cost of a unit of solar will be half of that of a cost of a piece of unit of electricity produced by fossil fuels. And that network's going to be a lot more decentralized. It sounds like it's going to kind of look like a peer-to-peer network. I think that's really interesting. Maybe we're going to have some kind of free energy. I know there's going to be a big fight over that. I mean, if you think the music industry and MP3s was something, wait till this all starts going down. Some light Googling of 3D printing will blow your mind. NASA are sending 3D printers to Mars that will be printing out moon bases and rib cages, and people are printing out drugs. We're starting to grow food in vitro from cells. So this all got me thinking, well, what happens next? If energy, water, and basic goods are all kind of free, inequality is rising, but do we need jobs if the basic stuff's all free? Where are the lines going to be? Which networks will be open? Which networks will be closed? Will we live in this utopia where everything's free and everything's great? Or will things be locked down and controlled, and we'll be illegally 3D printing housing and all kinds of terrible things could be happening? So these two images are pieces of concept art from my friend Alex Johnson, who I work with at Rewind. His firm Dazzleship in London created these, and they're for a new sci-fi project we're working on called Broadside. which is about piracy in the future. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but hopefully I'll come back here in 8 years' time and tell you all about it. Thank you very much.